Hello everyone, this is Fahim Ahmed and today we are going to discuss about demand and the demand curve. But before we proceed, I would request everyone to please subscribe my channel. Link is already given in the description. Okay, let's proceed with demand and the demand curve. To understand the demand and the demand curve, first we have to understand what is market. A market is an institution or method that brings together buyers and sellers of particular goods, services, or resources. In simple words, market is a place where buyer comes to buy something and seller comes to sell goods, services, or resources. Now, what is demand? Demand is the relationship between the price of a product and the quantity demanded for that product at that price. Now I have highlighted two things. One is price of a product, another thing is quantity demanded. What is price of a product? Remember, everything in this world has a cost, has a price, and the price you pay to get that product is called price of a product. Now what is quantity demanded? A quantity demanded is the amount of goods that buyers are willing and able to purchase at a specific price. Now, there are two things which you have to understand in quantity demanded. One is willingness of buyer, another is purchase ability. If I have willingness but I don't have ability to purchase, it will not fall in the category of quantity demanded. Similarly, I have ability to purchase but I am not willing to purchase something, that also doesn't count under quantity demanded definition. Let's suppose I have $100. Now I want to buy apples, 1 dozen apples, which will cost me $20. Now I can buy 5 dozen apples. I have the ability to purchase, but I am not willing to buy 5 dozen apples because I don't want it or there's some other reason. So that doesn't meet the definition of quantity demanded. Now let's discuss what is law of demand. Now law of demand, when we discuss about law of demand, it's an economics basic and fundamental concept. It states that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. As price rise, the quantity demanded falls. When prices drop, the quantity demanded increases. So it's an inverse relationship. Since it's an inverse relationship, we will prepare its curve from downward slope, like from downward from left to the right. Let's see the table first. What does it say? Now we have two things: price of ice cream cone, another is quantity of cones demanded. But before we discuss this table, one thing you have to understand, you have to remember that price is an independent factor and quantity demanded is a dependent factor. That means, and price increase or decrease, it will affect the quantity demand will not affect price because it is a dependent factor. Independent factor is price, so price increases, so demand falls. If prices drop, demand increases. So independent factor is price and dependent factor is demand. Now we discuss about table: price of ice cream cone and quantity of cones demanded. When we talk about price of ice cream cone, so remember we said price is an independent factor and quantity demand is a dependent factor. So if prices goes down, quantity demand will increase. If prices goes up, quantity demand will increase. Now you can read this table from top to bottom and bottom to top. Like if we say that price rise, the quantity demand falls, so we should read it from top to bottom. When there was zero price, it was free of cost, so we were had the ability to get 12 quantity. But when it generally it's not zero, it's just for example. So let's take an example from 5. When the cost was 5, we had the ability to purchase 10 quantity. When cost increased from 5 to 10, so my ability to purchase and willingness reduced from 10 to 8. Similarly, when it increased from 10 to 15, it quantity demand decreased from 8 to 6 and so on. Now let's read the same table from bottom to top. My quantity demanded was 0 when price was 30. I didn't have ability to purchase any of the quantity. But when my price decreased from 30 to 25, my quantity demanded increased from 0 to 2. Similarly, when my price decreased more, like it decreased from 25 to 20, my quantity demanded increased from 2 to 4, and so on. So that's the table. Now let's discuss the same law of demand through our graph or demand curve. What is demand curve? It's a graph showing how the demand for a commodity or service varies with changes in its price. See, I'm saying with changes in its price, how the demand for a commodity or service varies. Because price is an independent factor, demand is a dependent factor. Now, how demand curve will move? The demand curve will move downward from the left to the right, which expresses the law of demand. What is law of demand? We discussed as the prices of a given commodity increases, the quantity demanded increases. Now, important point. Other things remain constant, unchanged. What are these other things which will remain constant or unchanged? We will discuss that thing, or you can say these are the assumptions. Like if we don't assume some of the factors, so law if we don't take those assumptions, then law of demand will not be applicable. Now first discuss the curve. In this curve, on my y-axis it's a price which is independent factor, on x-axis it's a quantity which is dependent factor. When price was 80, I had the ability to purchase 300 quantity. When price decreased from 80 to 60, my ability to purchase increased from 300 to 500. As I said, the demand curve will move downward from the left to the right. So it's moving downward. This is the red line which is demand curve. It's moving downward because it's an inverse relationship between price and the demand. So this is the curve. We discussed initially what is market, we discussed what is demand, we discussed what is law of demand. Now we discuss the demand curve. Now the last thing of today's lecture, which is other things remain constant, unchanged, or you can say the assumptions. When we apply law of demand, there are some assumptions which we have to consider. What are those assumptions? So these are 1 2 3 4 5 assumptions which we have to consider when discussing or studying law of demand. First thing, assume that the consumer's income remains same. Let's suppose my price increased from 25%. Similarly, at the same time, my income also increased by 25%. So although my price increased, but since my income increased from the same percentage at the same time, so it will not, although my price increased. So technically, if I talk about law of demand, so if my price increase, my demand, my ability to purchase should reduce. But since my income increased at the same level, same time, same percentage, so my ability also increased. Uh, like my ability remained constant. So although price increased, but it will not affect my demand. So the first assumption which you have to consider, that my income remain constant. If it increases and decreases, then we have a problem. Second, fashion doesn't change, show, or considers that the fashion doesn't show any changes. Like if fashion changes, then you increase the price or decrease the price, it will hardly make any difference in the demand, or probably it will affect demand very low. Third thing, restricts the innovation and new varieties of product in the market. Kareem service, we have a great example. Like in Pakistan or India, people used to use rickshaw services, but now since the introduction of Kareem, people stopped using rickshaw. Like demand of the rickshaw decreases. Although now rickshaw drivers decrease their price, but they will not be able to get the same quantity demanded, and the law of quantity demand will not be applicable if this assumptions, if there is an innovation. So if there is an innovation, law of demand will not be applicable. If there is a change in fashion, law of demand will not be applicable. If there is a change in income, law of demand will not be applicable. Fourth thing, if there is a change in the age structure, size and sex ratio of population increase from 1 million to 2 million, now price increase, but since the population increase, automatically our demand will also increase. So age, structure, size, and sex ratio of population should remain constant, unchanged. Last thing, avoids any type of changes fiscal policies, because of change in fiscal policies there is a risk that although price doesn't change but it may affect demand. Like if you introduce new import policies or export policies, so there is a possibility that it can increase demand or decrease the demand regardless of price increase or decrease. So these are the five factors, five assumptions which should remain constant or unchanged. If these factors or assumptions change, so our law of demand will not be applicable. So in this lecture we discussed about demand, law of demand, and the demand curve and the assumptions related to this. Now in next lecture will also be the continuation of demand topic. Thank you very much for listening, and hopefully, as I requested,